I'm going to be reading. I'm going to be reading. Okay? You can be here while I read, but you can't lay on my book. Okay? Happy Tuesday, Miss Deborah. Can you give me a thumbs up if you hear me all right? Excellent. Good. Thank you. Hello, University of Arizona. So glad you could join us this evening. Oh. I hope everyone's Tuesday has been all right so far. Ruby, your eyes are running, baby. What's the matter with your eyes? Good, good. All right. So we'll give it till about 5 after for people to join us, because I know this is our first Tuesday reading. So I know some folks may have forgotten. Some people may just be getting home and getting settled in and stuff. Hi, Papa. No, not on my book. Not on the book. Over here. Oh, Vicky. Ah. All right. Oh my goodness. It's so nice to see you all this evening. Thank you so much for joining me for our first Tuesday night reading. Ow. Be nice. Be nice. Thank you so much, Jody. Thank you. Oh, have you by chance found my my YouTube page? Did you look on my bio and find my link to my YouTube? Thank you, Miss Country Girl. Thank you. Yeah, so if you guys are liking my content on TikTok, by all means, please go and find me on YouTube and become one of my subscribers. You should be able to find the link on my bio. So like if you go to like the beginning of my bio and you'll see like the little Instagram camera icon, just click that and then you should be able to see the YouTube, the little YouTube icon, and you just click that and it takes you right to my YouTube page. So it's all of my Nikki video. It's exclusively at the moment my my Nikki video content, like all of my like other massage videos and my random other videos, like all of that stuff isn't on there. It's just my Nikki content for now. So I'll be taking this year to expand on my YouTube page. So bear with me, it's a work in progress. Oh, thank you so much for the rose. Oh. So do we have... Thank you, Melissa. So everyone who's with us at the moment, have you guys been with us from the beginning, or are you watching our reading for the first time? I'm going to be doing a Reader's Digest, kind of a catch-up for everyone who may not have been here up until today. So, oh, thank you for being a subscriber. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. You're from Australia? Oh. Miss Deborah from the beginning, yeah. Well, Miss Country Girl, welcome to the reading. I'm just gonna give like a quick. I'm gonna give it another minute. We're almost at 8:04, 8:05. So I'll give just a little quick synopsis of where we are in the story for now. But the book we're reading is All the Light We Cannot See, by Anthony Doerr. So, you know, if you happen to have this book at home, please feel free to follow along. We are currently on page 134, and the title of the chapter is called Etienne. So if you happen to have the book and you want to follow along, please feel free to do so. As a disclaimer, like all the other times, there's French in here, there's German in here. I will probably butcher it, and there's also been some English in here that I have butchered. So I'm apologizing for all of that ahead of time. I will say the things as best I can, but sometimes words are difficult. So we're all in this together. So, all right. So at this point in the story, we have been following primarily two different characters. We have been following Marie Laure, who is a blind Parisian girl, and she lives with her father in Paris. And her father is a locksmith who works for the Museum of Natural History. And the time frame is set in World War II. And at the moment, you know, the Germans have indeed invaded France, and they've made their way to Paris, and Marie and her father have escaped Paris, and they have made it out to the countryside to a town called Saint Malo, where Marie Laure's great uncle Etienne lives. And so we're about to meet him. We have been told that he's just a little bit crazy, you know, from some past experiences in his life. So. But we are also following the story of a little German boy named Werner. He and his sister, but primarily Werner. And Werner is a young orphan. He and his sister are living in an orphanage. And Werner is a bit of a tinkerer. He's very good with mechanics and machinery. And so he has been kind of drafted, so to speak. He's a young boy. He's only, I think, 13, 14 at the moment in the story. And he's going to be used for communications, to help with the soldiers communicating through radio and things, for the Germans, for the Nazis. So that's kind of where we're at. So with that, I know that there's a lot of gaps, and I know there's a lot of backstory that we didn't get a chance to cover, but if you get a chance to read this book on your own, it's a great read. So if you've got it with you, follow along. Here we go. Etienne. For 3 days, she does not meet her great uncle. Then, feeling her way to the toilet on the 4th morning after their arrival, she steps on something small and hard. She crouches and locates it with her fingers. Whorled and smooth, a sculpture of vertical folds incised by a tapering spiral. The aperture broad and oval, she whispers, "A whelk." One stride in front of the first shell, she finds another, then a third, and then a fourth. The trail of seashells arcs past the toilet and down a flight to the closed fifth-floor door she knows by now is his, beyond which issues the concerted whispers of pianos playing. A voice says, "Come in." She expects fustiness, an elderly funk, but the room smells mildly of soap and books and dried seaweed, not unlike Dr. Jaffard's laboratory. "Great-uncle?" Marie-Laure. His voice is low and soft, a piece of silk you might keep in a drawer and pull out only on rare occasions, just to feel it between your fingers. She reaches into space, and a cool, bird-boned hand takes hers. "He is feeling better," he says. "I am sorry I have not been able to meet you sooner." The pianos plink along softly. It sounds as if a dozen are playing all at once, as if the sound comes from every point of the compass. "How many radios do you have, Uncle?" "Let me show you." He brings her hands to a shelf. "This one is stereo, heterodyne. I assembled it myself." She imagines a diminutive pianist, dressed in a tuxedo, playing inside the machine. Next, he places her hands on a big cabinet radio, then on a third no bigger than a toaster. 11 sets in all, he says, boyish pride slipping into his voice. "I can hear ships at sea. Madrid, Brazil, London. I heard India once. Here at the edge of the city, so high in the house, we get superb reception." He lets her dig through a box of fuses, another of switches. He leads her to bookshelves next, the spines of hundreds of books, a bird cage, beetles in matchboxes, an electric mousetrap, a glass paperweight inside which, he says, a scorpion has been entombed, jars of miscellaneous connectors, 100 more things she cannot identify. He has the entire 5th floor, one big room except for the landing to himself. 3 windows open onto the Rue Vaudreuil in the front, 3 more onto the alley in the back. There is a small and ancient bed, his coverlet smooth and tight, a tidy desk, a davenport. "That's the tour," he says, almost whispering. Her great-uncle seems kind, curious, and entirely sane. Stillness. This is what he radiates more than anything else. The stillness of a tree, of a mouse blinking in the dark. Madame Manec brings sandwiches. Etienne doesn't have any Jules Verne, but he does have Darwin, he says, and reads to her from The Voyage of the Beagle, translating English to French as he goes. The varieties of species among the jumping spiders appears almost infinite. Music spirals out of the radios, and it is splendid to drowse on the davenport, to be warm and fed, to feel the sentences hoist her up and carry her somewhere else. 6 blocks away at the telegraph office, Marie-Laure's father presses his face to the window to watch 2 German motorcycles with sidecars roar through the Port St. Vincent. The shutters of the town are drawn, but between slats, over sills, 1,000 eyes peer out. Behind the motorcycles roll 2 trucks. In the rear glides a single black Mercedes. Sunlight flashes from the hood ornaments and chrome fittings as the little procession grinds to a stop on the ringed gravel drive in front of the soaring, lichened street walls of the Chateau Saint-Malo. An elderly, preternaturally tanned man, the mayor, somebody explains, waits with a white handkerchief in his big sailor's hands, a barely perceptible shake showing in his wrists. The Germans climb out of their vehicles, more than a dozen of them. Their boots gleam and their uniforms are tidy. 2 carry carnations. 1 urges along a beagle on a rope. Several gaze open-mouthed up at the facade of the chateau. A short man in a field captain's uniform emerges from the back seat of the Mercedes and brushes something invisible from the sleeve of his coat. He exchanges a few words with a thin aide-de-camp who translates to the mayor. The mayor nods. Then the short man disappears through the huge doors. Minutes later, the aide-de-camp flings open the shutters of an upstairs window and gazes a moment across the rooftops before unfurling a crimson flag over the brick and securing its eyelets to the sill. Jungmanner. It's a castle out of a storybook. 8 or 9 stone buildings sheltered below hills, rust-colored roofs, narrow windows, spires and turrets, weeds sprouting from between roof tiles. A pretty little river winds through athletics fields. Not in the clearest hour of Zollveren's clearest day has Werner breathed air so unadulterated by dust. A one-armed bunkmaster sets forth rules in a belligerent torrent. This is your parade uniform. This is your field uniform. This is your gym uniform. Suspenders crossed in the back, parallel in the front. Sleeves rolled to the elbow. Each boy is to carry a knife in a scabbard on the right side of the belt. Raise your right arm when you wish to be called upon. Always a line in rows of 10. No books, no cigarettes, no food, no personal possessions. Nothing in your locker but uniforms, boots, knife, polish. No talking after lights out. Letters home will be posted on Wednesdays. You will strip away your weakness, your cowardice, your hesitation. You will become like a waterfall, a volley of bullets. You will all surge in the same direction at the same pace toward the same cause. You will forego comforts. You will live by duty alone. You will eat country and breathe nation. Do they understand? The boys shout that they do. There are 400 of them, plus 30 instructors and 50 more on the staff. NCOs and cooks, groomsmen and housekeepers. Some cadets are as young as 9. The oldest are 17. Gothic faces, sharp noses, pointed chins, blue eyes, all of them. Werner sleeps in a tiny dormitory with 7 other 14-year-olds. The bunk above belongs to Frederick, a reedy boy, thin as a blade of grass, skin as pale as cream. Frederick is new, too. He's from Berlin. His father is assistant to an ambassador. When Frederick speaks, his attention floats up, as though he's scanning the sky for something. He and Werner eat their first meal in their starchy new uniforms at a long wooden table in the refectory. Some boys talk in whispers, some sit alone, some gulp food as if they have not eaten in days. Through 3 arched windows, dawn sends a sheaf of hallowed golden rays. Frederick flutters his fingers and asks, "Do you like birds?" "Sure." "Do you know about hooded crows?" Werner shakes his head. "Hooded crows are smarter than most mammals, even monkeys. I've seen them put nuts they can't crack in the road and wait for cars to run over them to get at the kernel. Werner, you and I are going to be great friends. I'm sure of it." A portrait of the Fuhrer glowers over every classroom. Learning happens on backless benches, at wooden tables grooved by the boredom of countless boys before them. Squires, monks, conscripts, cadets. On Werner's first day, he walks past the half-open door of the Technical Sciences Laboratory and glimpses a room as big as Zollveren's drugstore, lined with brand-new sinks and glass-fronted cabinets, inside which wait sparkling beakers and graduated cylinders and balances and burners. Frederick has to urge him along. On their second day, a withered phrenologist gives a presentation to the entire student body. The lights in the refectory dim, a projector whirs, and a cartful of circles appears on the far wall. The old man stands beneath the projection screen and whisks the tip of a billiards cue through the grids. White circles represent pure German blood. Circles with black indicate the proportion of foreign blood. Notice group 2, number 5. He raps the screen with his cue and it ripples. Marriage between a pure German and a one-quarter Jew is still permissible, you see. A half-hour later, Werner and Frederick are reading Goethe in Poetics. Then they're magnetizing needles in field exercises. The bunk master announces schedules of Byzantine complication. Mondays are for mechanics, state history, racial sciences. Tuesdays are for horsemanship, orienteering, military history. Everyone, even the 9-year-olds, will be taught to clean, break down, and fire a Mauser rifle. Afternoons, they lash themselves into a snarl of cartridge belts and run. Run to the troughs, run to the flag, run up the hill. Run carrying each other on your backs, run carrying your rifle above your head. Run, crawl, swim. Then more running. The star-flooded nights, the dew-soaked dawns, the hushed ambulatories, the enforced asceticism. Never has Werner felt part of something so single-minded. Never has he felt such a hunger to belong. In the rows of dormitories are cadets who talk of alpine skiing, of duels, of jazz clubs and governesses and boar hunting. boys who employ curse words with virtuistic skill, and boys who talk about cigarettes named for cinema stars, boys who speak of telephoning the colonel, and boys who have baronesses for mothers. There are boys who have been admitted not because they are good at anything in particular, but because their fathers work for ministries. And the way they talk, one mustn't expect figs from thistles. I'd pollinate her in a blink, you shit. Bear up and funk it, boys. There are cadets who do everything right. Perfect posture, expert marksmanship, boots polished so perfectly that they reflect clouds. There are cadets who have skin like butter and irises like sapphires and ultra-fine networks of blue veins laced across the backs of their hands. For now, though, beneath the whip of the administration, they are all the same, all Jungmanner. They hustle through the gates together, gulp fried eggs in the refectory together, march across the quadrangle, perform roll calls, salute the colors, shoot rifles, run, bathe, and suffer together. They are each a mound of clay, and the potter that is the portly, shiny-faced commandant is throwing 400 identical pots. We are young, they sing. We are steadfast. We have never compromised. We have so many castles yet to storm. Werner sways between exhaustion, confusion, and exhilaration. That his life has been so wholly redirected astounds him. He keeps any doubts at bay by memorizing lyrics or the routes to classrooms. By holding before his eyes a vision of the technical sciences laboratory, 9 tables, 30 stools, coils, variable capacitors, amplifiers, batteries, soldering irons locked away in those gleaming cabinets. Above him, kneeling on his bunk, Frederick peers out the open window through a pair of antique field glasses and makes a record on the bed rail of birds he has sighted. 1 notch under red-necked grabe, 6 notches under thrush nightingale. Out on the grounds, a group of 10-year-olds is carrying torches and swastika flags toward the river. The procession pauses and a gust of wind tears at the torch flames. Then they march on, their song swirling up through the window like a bright, pulsing cloud. Oh, take me up into the ranks, so that I do not die a common death. I do not want to die in vain. What I want is to fall on the sacrificial mound. Real quick, does anyone hear the buzzing? Is that bothering anybody? If not, then I'll just keep reading. Okay, fabulous. Vienna. Sergeant Major Reinhold von Rumpel is 41 years old. Not so old that he cannot be promoted. He has moist red lips, pale, almost translucent cheeks like fillets of raw sole, and an instinct for correctness that rarely fails him. He has a wife who suffers his absences without complaint, and who arranges porcelain kittens by color, lightest to darkest, on 2 different shelves in their drawing room in Stuttgart. He also has 2 daughters whom he has not seen in 9 months. The eldest, Veronica, is deeply earnest. Her letters to him include phrases like sacred resolve, proud accomplishments, and unparalleled in history. Von Rumpel's particular gift is for diamonds. He can facet and polish stones as well as any Aryan jeweler in Europe, and he often spots fakes at a glance. He studied crystallography in Munich, apprenticed as a polisher in Antwerp, has been given one glorious afternoon to Charterhouse Street in London, to an unmarked diamond house, where he was asked to turn out his pockets and ushered up 3 staircases through 3 locked doors, and seated at a table where a man with a mustache waxed to knife points let him examine a 92-carat raw diamond from South Africa. Before the war, the life of Reinhold von Rumpel was pleasant enough. He was a gemologist who ran an appraisal business out of a 2nd-story shop behind Stuttgart's old chancellery. Clients would bring in stones and he'd tell them what they were worth. Sometimes he'd recut diamonds or consult on high-level faceting projects. If he occasionally cheated a customer, he told himself that was part of the game. Because of the war, his job has expanded. Now, Sergeant Major von Rumpel has the chance to do what no one has done in centuries, not since the Mughal dynasty, not since the Khans, perhaps not in history. The capitulation of France is only weeks past, and already he has seen things he did not dream he would see in 6 lifetimes. A 17th century globe as big around as a small car, with rubies to mark volcanoes, sapphires clustered at the poles, and diamonds for world capitals. He has held a dagger handle at least 400 years old, made of white jade and inlaid with emeralds. Just yesterday, on the road to Vienna, he took possession of a 570-piece china set with a single marquee-cut diamond set into the rim of every single dish. Where the police confiscated these treasures and from whom he does not ask. Already he has personally packed them into a crate and belted it shut and numbered it with white paint and seen it loaded inside a train car where it sits under 24-hour guard, waiting to be sent to high command, waiting for more. This particular summer afternoon, in a dusty geological library in Vienna, Sergeant Major von Rumpel follows an underweight secretary wearing brown shoes, brown stockings, a brown skirt, and a brown blouse through stacks of periodicals. The secretary sets down a step stool, climbs, and reaches. Tavernier's 1676 Travels in India. P.S. Palace's 1793 travels through the southern provinces of the Russian Empire. Streeter's 1898 Precious Stones and Gems. Rumor is that the Fuhrer is compiling a wish list of precious objects from all around Europe and Russia. They say he intends to remake the Austrian town of Linz into an Empyrean city, the cultural capital of the world. A vast promenade, mausoleum, acropolis, planetarium, library, opera house. Everything marble and granite, everything profoundly clean. At its core, he plans a kilometer-long museum, a trove of the greatest achievements in human culture. The document is real, von Rumpel has heard, 400 pages. He sits at a table in the stacks. He tries to cross his legs, but a slight swelling troubles his groin today. Odd, though not painful. The mousy librarian brings books. He pages slowly through the Tavernier, the Streeter, Murray's sketches of Persia. He reads entries on the 300-carat Orloff diamond from Moscow, the Nur al-Ain, the 48.5-carat Dresden green. Toward evening he finds it, the story of a prince who could not be killed, a priest who warned of a goddess's wrath, a French prelate who believed he'd bought the same stone centuries later. Sea of flames, grayish-blue with a red hue at its center, recorded at 133 carats, either lost or willed to the King of France in 1738 on the condition that it be locked away for 200 years. He looks up. Suspended lamps, rows of spines fading off into dusty gold, all of Europe, and he aims to find one pebble tucked inside its folds. Her father says their weapons gleam as if they have never been fired. He says their boots are clean and their uniforms spotless. He says they look as if they have just stepped out of air-conditioned train cars. The townswomen who stop by Madame Manec's kitchen door in ones and twos say the Germans, they refer to them as the Boches, buy every postcard on every pharmacy rack. They say the Boches buy straw dolls and candied apricots and stale cakes from the window of the confectionery. The Boches buy shirts from Monsieur Verdier and lingerie from Monsieur Morvan. The Boches require absurd quantities of butter and cheese. The Boches have guzzled down every bottle of champagne the caviste would sell them. Hitler, the women whisper, is touring Parisian monuments. Curfews are installed. Music that can be heard outdoors is banned. Public dances are banned. The country is in mourning, and we must behave respectfully, announces the mayor, though what authority he retains is not clear. Every time she comes within earshot, Marie-Laure hears the psst of her father lighting another match. His hands flutter between his pockets. Mornings he alternates between Madame Manec's kitchen the tobacco shop, and the post office, where he waits in interminable queues to use the telephone. Afternoons he repairs things around Etienne's house, a loose cabinet door, a squeaking stairboard. He asks Madame Manec about the reliability of the neighbors. He flips the locking clasp on his tool case over and over until Marie Laure begs him to stop. One day Etienne sits with Marie Laure and reads to her in his feathery voice. The next he suffers from what he calls a headache and sequesters himself inside his study behind a locked door. Madame Manec sneaks Marie Laure chocolate bars, slices of cake. This morning they squeeze lemons into glasses full of water and sugar, and she lets Marie Laure drink as much as she likes. "How long will he stay in there, madame?" "Sometimes just a day or two," Madame Manec says. "Sometimes longer." 1 week in St. Malo becomes 2. Marie begins to feel that her life, like 20,000 leagues under the sea, has been interrupted halfway through. There was Volume 1, when Marie Laure and her father lived in Paris and went to work, and now there is Volume 2, where Germans ride motorcycles through these strange, narrow streets, and her uncle vanishes inside his own house. "Papa, when will we leave?" "As soon as I hear from Paris." "Why do we have to sleep in this little bedroom?" "I'm sure we could clean out a downstairs room if you'd like." "What about the room across the hall from us?" Etienne and I agreed we would not use it. "Why not?" "It belonged to your grandfather." "When can I go to the sea?" "Not today, Marie." "Can't we go for a walk around the block?" "It's too dangerous." She wants to shriek. What dangers await? When she opens her bedroom window, she hears no screams, no explosions, only the calls of birds that her great-uncle calls gannets, and the sea, and the occasional throb of an airplane as it passes far overhead. She spends her hours learning the house. The first floor belongs to Madame Manec, clean, navigable, full of visitors who come through the kitchen door to trade in small-town scandal. There's the dining room, the foyer, a hutch full of antique dishes in the hall that tremble whenever anyone walks past, and a door off the kitchen that leads to Madame's room, a bed, a sink, a chamber pot. 11 winding steps lead to the second floor, which is full of the smells of faded grandeur, an old sewing room, a former maid's room. Right here on the landing, Madame Manec tells her, pallbearers dropped the coffin carrying Etienne's great-aunt. The coffin flipped over and she slid down the whole flight. They were all horrified, but she looked entirely unaffected. More clutter on the third floor. Boxes of jars, metal discs, and rusty jigsaws, buckets of what might be electrical components, engineering manuals in piles around a toilet. By the fourth floor, things are piled everywhere, in the rooms and corridors and along the staircase, baskets of what must be machine parts, shoe boxes loaded with screws, antique dollhouses built by her great-grandfather. Etienne's huge study colonizes the entire fifth floor, alternately deeply quiet or else full of voices or music or static. Then there's the sixth floor, her grandfather's tidy bedroom on the left, toilet straight ahead, the little room where she sleeps with her father on the right. When the wind is blowing, which it almost always is, with the walls groaning and the shutters banging, the rooms overloaded and the staircase wound tightly up through its center, the house seems the material equivalent of her uncle's inner being, apprehensive, isolated, but full of cobwebby wonders. In the kitchen, Madame Manec's friends fuss over Marie Laure's freckle and hair. In Paris, women say, people are waiting in line 5 hours for a loaf of bread. People are eating pets, crushing pigeons with bricks for soup. There's no pork, no rabbit, no cauliflower. The headlights of cars are all painted blue, they say. And at night the city is as quiet as a graveyard. No buses, no trains, hardly any gasoline. Marie Laure sits at the square table, a plate of cookies in front of her, and imagines the old women with veiny hands and milky eyes and oversized ears. From the kitchen window comes the whit-whit-whit of a barn swallow, footfalls on ramparts, halyards clinking against masts, hinges and chains creaking in the harbor. Ghosts, Germans, snails. Hauptmann. A rosy-cheeked and diminutive instructor of technical sciences named Dr. Hauptmann peels off his brass-buttoned coat and hangs it over the back of a chair. He orders the cadets in Werner's class to collect hinged metal boxes from a locked cabinet at the back of the laboratory. Inside each are gears, lenses, fuses, springs, shackles, and resistors. There's a fat coil of copper wire, a tiny instrument hammer, and a 2-terminal battery as big as a shoe, finer equipment than Werner has ever had access to in his life. The little professor stands at the chalkboard drawing a wiring schematic for a simple Morse code practice circuit. He sets down his chalk, presses his slender fingertips together, 5 to 5, and asks the boys to assemble the circuit with the parts in their kits. You have 1 hour. Most of the boys blanch. They dump everything out on the tables and poke gingerly at the parts as if at trinkets imported from some future age. Frederick plucks random pieces out of his box and holds them to the light. For a moment, Werner is back inside his attic room at Children's House, his head a swarm of questions. What is lightning? How high could you jump if you lived on Mars? What is the difference between twice 25 and twice 5 and 20? Then he takes the battery, 2 rectangles of sheet metal, some penny nails, and the instrument hammer from his box. In under a minute he has built an oscillator to match the schematic. The little professor frowns. He tests Werner's circuit, which works. Right, he says, and stands in front of Werner's table and laces his hands behind his back. Next, take from your kit the disc-shaped magnet, a wire, a screw, and your battery. Though his instructions seem meant for the class, he looks at Werner alone. That is all you may use. Who can build a simple motor? Some boys stir the parts in their kits half-heartedly, most simply watch. Werner feels Dr. Hauptmann's attention on him like a floodlight. He sticks the magnet to the screw's head and holds the screw's point to the positive terminal on the battery. When he runs the wire from the negative side of the battery to the head of the screw, both the screw and the magnet start to spin. The operation takes him no more than 15 seconds. Hush. Dr. Hauptmann's mouth is partially open. His face is flushed, adrenalized. What is your name, cadet? Fenning, sir. What else can you make? Werner studies the parts on his table. A doorbell, sir? Or a Morse beacon? An ometer? The other boys crane their necks. Dr. Hauptmann's lips are pink and his eyelids are improbably thin, as though he is watching Werner even when he blinks. He says, "Make them all." Flying couch. Need to moisturize my lips. Excuse me. Posters go up in the market, on tree trunks in the place Chateaubriand. Voluntary surrender of firearms. Anyone who does not cooperate will be shot. At noon the following day, various Bretons troop in to drop off weapons. Farmers on mule carts from miles away plodding old sailors with antique pistols, a few hunters with outrage in their eyes gazing at the floor as they turn in their rifles. In the end, it's a pathetic pile, maybe 300 weapons in all, half of them rusted. 2 young gendarmes pile them into the back of a truck and drive up the narrow street and across the causeway and are gone. No speeches, no explanations. "Please, Papa, can't I go out?" "Soon, little dove." But he is distracted. He smokes so much it is as if he's turning himself into ash. Lately he stays up working frenetically on a model of St. Malo that he claims is for her, adding new houses every day, framing ramparts, mapping streets, so that she can learn the town the way she learned their neighborhood in Paris. Wood, glue, nails, sandpaper. Rather than comforting her, the noises and smells of his manic diligence make her more anxious. Why will she have to learn the streets of St. Malo? How long will they be here? In the 5th floor study, Marie Laure listens to her great-uncle read another page of The Voyage of the Beagle. Darwin has hunted rays in Patagonia, studied owls outside Buenos Aires, and scaled a waterfall in Tahiti. He pays attention to slaves, rocks, lightning, finches, and the ceremony of pressing noses in New Zealand. She loves especially to hear about the dark coasts of South America, where, with their impenetrable walls of trees and offshore breezes full of the stink of rotting kelp and the cries of whelping seals. She loves to imagine Darwin at night, leaning over the ship's rail to stare into bioluminescent waves, watching the tracks of penguins marked by fiery green wakes. Bonsoir, she says to Etienne, standing on the davenport in his study. I may only be a girl of 12, but I am a brave French explorer who has come to help you with your adventures. Etienne adopts a British accent. Good evening, mademoiselle. Why don't you come to the jungle with me and eat these butterflies? They're as big as dinner plates and may not be poisonous. Who knows? I would love to eat your butterflies, Monsieur Darwin, but first I will eat these cookies. Other evenings they play flying couch. They climb onto the davenport and sit side by side, and Etienne says, Where to tonight, mademoiselle? The jungle, or Tahiti, or Mozambique. Oh, it's a long journey this time, Etienne will say in an entirely new voice, smooth, velvety, a conductor's drawl. That's the Atlantic Ocean far below. It's shining under the moonlight. Can you smell it? Feel how cold it is up here. Feel the wind in your hair? Where are we now, Uncle? We're in Borneo. Can't you tell? We're skimming the treetops now. Big leaves are glimmering below us, and there are coffee bushes over there. Smell them? And Marie Laure will indeed smell something, whether because her uncle is passing coffee grounds beneath her nose or because they really are flying over the coffee trees of Borneo. She does not want to decide. They visit Scotland, New York City, Santiago. More than once they put on winter coats and visit the moon. Can't you feel how lightweight we are, Marie? You can move by hardly twitching a muscle. He sets her in his wheeled desk chair and pants as he whirls her in circles until she cannot laugh any more for the pain of it. Here, try some nice fresh moon flesh, he says, and into her mouth goes something that tastes a lot like cheese. Always at the end they sit side by side again and pound the cushions, and slowly the room rematerializes around them. Ah, he says more quietly, his accent fading, the faintest touch of dread returning to his voice. Here we are, home. The sum of angles. Werner is summoned to the office of the Technical Sciences professor. A trio of sleek, long-legged hounds swirls around him as he enters. The room is lit by a pair of green-shaded banker's lamps, and in the shadows Werner can see shelves crowded with encyclopedias, models of windmills, miniature telescopes, and prisms. Dr. Hauptmann stands behind his big desk wearing his brass-buttoned coat, as though he too has just arrived. Tight curls frame his ivory forehead. He tugs off his leather gloves, one finger at a time. Drop a log on the fire, please. Werner tacks across the room and stirs the coals to life. In the corner, he realizes, sits a third person, a massive figure camped sleepily in an armchair intended for a much smaller man. He is Frank Volkheimer, an upperclassman, 17 years old, a colossal boy from some boreal village, a legend among the young cadets. Supposedly, Volkheimer has carried 3 first years across the river by holding them above his head. Supposedly, he has lifted the tail end of the commandant's automobile high enough to slip a jack under the axle. There is a rumor that he crushed a communist windpipe with his hands. Another that he grabbed the muzzle of a stray dog and cut out its eyes just to inure himself in the suffering of other beings. They call him the Giant. Even in the low, flickering light, Werner sees that veins climb Volkheimer's forearms like vines. A student has never built the motor, says Hauptmann, his back partially to Volkheimer, not without help. Werner does not know how to reply, so he does not. He pokes the fire one last time, and sparks rise up the chimney. Can you do trigonometry, cadet? Only what I have been able to teach myself, sir. Hauptmann takes a sheet of paper from a drawer and writes on it. Do you know what this is? Werner squints. A formula, sir. Do you comprehend its uses? I believe it is a way to use two known points to find the location of a third unknown point. Hauptmann's eyes glitter. He looks like someone who has just discovered something very valuable lying right in front of him on the ground. If I give you the known points and a distance between them, Cadet, can you solve it? Can you draw the triangle? I believe so. Sit at my desk, Fenning. Take my chair. Here's a pencil. When he sits in the desk chair, the toes of Werner's boots do not reach the ground. The fire pumps heat into the room. Block out giant Frank Volkheimer with his mammoth boots and cinder-block jaw. Block out the little aristocratic professor pacing back and forth in front of the hearth, and the late hour and the dogs and the shelves brimming with interesting things. There's only this. Werner plugs Hauptmann's numbers into the equation. He imagines two observers in a field pacing out the distance between them, then leveling their eyes on a far-off landmark, a sailing ship or a smokestack. When Werner asks for a slide rule, the professor slips one onto the desk immediately, having expected the request. Werner takes it without looking and begins to calculate the signs. Volkheimer watches. The little doctor paces, hands behind his back. The fire pops. The only sounds are the breathing of the dogs and the clicking of the slide rule's cursor. Eventually, Werner says, 16.43, Herr Doctor. He draws the triangle and labels the distances of each segment and passes the paper back. Hauptmann checks something in a leather book. Volkheimer shifts slightly in his chair. His gaze is both interested and indolent. The professor presses one of his palms flat to the desk while reading, frowning absently, as though waiting for a thought to pass. Werner is seized with a sudden and foreboding dread, but then Hauptmann looks back at him, and the feeling subsides. It says in your application papers that when you leave here, you wish to study electrical mechanics in Berlin. And you are an orphan, is that correct? Another glance at Volkheimer. Werner nods. My sister, a scientist's work, Cadet, is determined by two things: his interests, and the interests of his time. Do you understand? I think so. We live in exceptional times, Cadet. A thrill enters Werner's chest. Firelit rooms lined with books. These are the places in which important things happen. You will work in the laboratory after dinner, every night, even Sundays. Yes, sir. Start tomorrow. Yes, sir. Volkheimer here will keep an eye out for you. Take these biscuits. The professor produces a tin with a bow on it. And breathe, Fenning. You cannot hold your breath every time you're in my laboratory. Yes, sir. Cold air whistles through the walls, so pure it makes Werner dizzy. A trio of moths swim against the ceiling in his bunk room. He unlaces his boots and folds his trousers in the dark and sets the tin of biscuits on top. Frederick peers over the edge of his bunk. Where did you go? I got cookies, whispers Werner. I heard an eagle owl tonight. Hush, hisses a boy 2 bunks down. Werner passes up a biscuit. Frederick whispers, Do you know about them? They're really rare, big as gliders. This one was probably a young male looking for new territory. He was in one of the poplar trees beside the parade ground. Oh, says Werner. Greek letters move across the undersides of his eyelids. Isosceles triangles, beta, sine curves. He sees himself in a white coat, striding past machines. Someday, he'll probably win a prize. Code breaking, rocket propulsion, all the latest. We live in exceptional times. From the hall come the clicking boot heels of the bunkmaster. Frederick tips back onto his bunk. I couldn't see him, he whispers, but I heard him perfectly. Shut your face, says a second boy. You'll get us thrashed. Frederick says nothing more. Werner stops chewing. The bunkmaster's boots go quiet. Either he is gone or he has paused outside the door. Out on the grounds, someone is splitting wood. and Werner listens to the ringing of the sledgehammer against the wedge and the quick, frightened breaths of the boys all around him. The Professor. Etienne is reading Darwin to Marie-Laure when he stops mid-syllable. Uncle? He breathes nervously, out of pursed lips, as if blowing on a spoonful of hot soup. He whispers, "Someone's here." Marie-Laure can hear nothing. No footfalls, no knocks. Madame Manec whisks a broom across the landing one floor up. Etienne hands her the book. She can hear him unplug a radio, then tangle himself in its cords. "Uncle?" she says again. But he is leaving his study, floundering downstairs. Are they in danger? And she follows him to the kitchen, where she can hear him laboring to slide the kitchen table out of the way. He pulls up a ring in the center of the floor. Beneath, a hatch waits, a square hole out of which washes a damp, frightening smell. One step down. Hurry now. Is this a cellar? What has her uncle seen? She has set one foot on the top rung of a ladder when the blocky shoes of Madame Manec come clomping into the kitchen. "Really, Master Etienne, please." Etienne's voice from below. "I heard something. Someone. You are frightening her. It is nothing. Marie-Laure, come with me now." Marie-Laure backs out. Below her, her great-uncle whispers nursery rhymes to himself. "I can sit with him for a bit, madame. Maybe we could read some more out of our book, uncle." The cellar, she gathers, is merely a dank hole in the ground. They sit a while on a rolled carpet with the trapdoor open and listen to Madame Manec hum as she makes tea in the kitchen above them. Etienne trembles lightly beside her. "Did you know," says Marie-Laure, "that the chance of being hit by lightning is 1 in 1,000,000? Dr. Giffard taught me that." "In 1 year or in 1 lifetime?" "I'm not sure." "You should have asked." Again those quick, pursed exhalations, as though his whole body urges him to flee. "What happens if you go outside, uncle?" "I get uneasy." His voice is almost inaudible. "But what makes you uneasy?" "Being outside." "What part?" "Big spaces." "Not all spaces are big. Your street is not that big, is it?" "Not as big as the streets you are used to." "You like eggs and figs and tomatoes. They were in our lunch. They grow outside." He laughs softly. "Of course they do." "Don't you miss the world?" He is quiet. So is she. Both ride spirals of memory. "I have the whole world here," he says, and taps the cover of Darwin. "And in my radios, right at my fingertips." Her uncle seems almost a child, monastic in the modesty of his needs and wholly independent of any sort of temporal obligations. And yet she can tell he is visited by fears so immense, so multiple, that she can almost feel the terror pulsing inside him, as though some beast breathes all the time at the window panes of his mind. "Could you read some more, please?" she asks, and Etienne opens the book and whispers. Delight itself is a weak term to express the feeling of a naturalist who, for the first time, has wandered by himself into a Brazilian forest. After a few paragraphs, Marie-Laure says without preamble, "Tell me about that bedroom upstairs, across from the one I sleep in." He stops, again his quick, nervous breaths. "There's a little door at the back of it," she says, "but it's locked. What's through there?" He is silent for long enough that she worries she has upset him. But then he stands, and his knees crack like twigs. "Are you getting one of your headaches, uncle?" "Come with me." They wind all the way up the stairs. On the 6th-floor landing, they turn left, and he pushes open the door to what was once her grandfather's room. She has already run her hands over its contents many times. A wooden oar nailed to a wall, a window dressed with long curtains, a single bed, a model ship on a shelf. At the back stands a wardrobe so large she cannot reach its top, nor stretch her arms wide enough to touch both sides at once. These are his things? Etienne unlatches the little door beside the wardrobe. "Go on." She gropes through, dry, confined heat. Mice scuttle, and her fingers find a ladder. It leads to the garret. It's not high. 7 rungs. At the top she stands. She has the sense of a long, sloped-walled space pressed beneath the gable of the roof. The peak of the ceiling is just taller than she is. Etienne climbs up behind her and takes her hand. Her feet find cables on the floor. They snake between dusty boxes, overwhelm a sawhorse. He leads her through a thicket of them to what feels like an upholstered piano bench at the far end and helps her sit. This is the attic. That's the chimney in front of us. Put your hands on the table. There you are. Metal boxes cover the tabletop. Tubes, coils, switches, meters, at least 1 gramophone. This whole part of the attic, she realizes, is some sort of machine. The sun bakes the slates above their heads. Etienne secures a headset over Marie Laurey's ears. Through the headphones, she can hear him turn a crank, switch on something, and then, as if positioned directly in the center of her head, a piano plays a sweet, simple song. The song fades, and a staticky voice says, "Consider a single piece glowing in your family's stove. See it, children? That chunk of coal was once a green plant, a fern or reed that lived 1 million years ago, or maybe 2 million, or maybe 100 million. After a little while, the voice gives way to the piano again. Her uncle pulls off the headset. As a boy, he says, my brother was good at everything, but his voice was what people commented on most. The nuns at St. Vincent's wanted to build choirs around it. We had a dream together, Henri and I, to make recordings and sell them. He had the voice and I had the brains, and back then everyone wanted gramophones, and hardly anyone was making programs for children. So we contacted a recording company in Paris, and they expressed interest, and I wrote 10 different scripts about science, and Henri rehearsed them, and finally we started recording. Your father was just a boy, but he would come around to listen. It was one of the happiest times of my life. Then there was the war. We became signalmen. Our job, mine and your grandfather's, was to knit telegraph wires from command positions at the rear to field officers at the front. Most nights the enemy would shoot pistol flares called very lights over the trenches. Short-lived stars suspended in the air from parachutes, meant to illuminate possible targets for snipers. Every soldier within reach of the glare would freeze while it lasted. Some hours, 80 or 90 of these flares would go off, one after another, and the night would turn stark and strange in that magnesium glow. It would be so quiet, the only sound the fizzling of the flares, and then you'd hear the whistle of a sniper's bullet streak out of the darkness and bury itself in the mud. We would stay as close together as we could, but I'd become paralyzed sometimes. I could not move any part of my body, not even my fingers, not even my eyelids. Henri would stay right beside me and whisper those scripts, the ones we recorded, sometimes all night, over and over, as though weaving some kind of protective screen around us until morning came. But he died, and I did not. This, she realizes, is the basis of his fear, all fear, that a light you are powerless to stop will turn on you and usher a bullet to its mark. Who built all of this, Uncle? This machine? I did. After the war, it took me years. How does it work? It's a radio transmitter. This switch here, he guides her hand to it, powers up the microphone, and this one runs the phonograph. Here's the premodulation amplifier, and these are the vacuum tubes, and these are the coils. The antenna telescopes up along the chimney, 12 meters. Can you feel the lever? Think of energy as a wave, and the transmitter is sending out smooth cycles of those waves. Your voice creates a disruption in those cycles. She stops listening. It's dusty and confusing and mesmerizing all at once. How old must all of this be? 10 years? 20? What did you transmit, Uncle? The recordings of my brother. The gramophone company in Paris wasn't interested anymore, but every night I played the 10 recordings we'd made until most of them were worn out. And his song. The piano? Debussy's Clair de Lune. He touches a metal cylinder with a sphere stuck on top. I just stuck the microphone into the bell of the gramophone and voila! She leans over the microphone, says, "Hello, out there." He laughs his feathery laugh. "Did it ever reach any children?" she asks. "I don't know." "How far can it transmit, Uncle?" "Far." "To England?" "Easily." "To Paris?" "Yes, but I wasn't trying to reach England or Paris. I thought that if I made the broadcast powerful enough, my brother would hear me, that I could bring him some peace, protect him as he always had protected me." "You'd play your brother's own voice to him after he died?" "And Debussy." "Did he ever talk back?" The attic ticks. What ghosts sidle along the walls right now, trying to overhear? She can almost taste her great-uncle's fright in the air. "No," he says. "He never did." Julie, what's up? If you're still listening. To my dear sister Yuta. Some of the boys whisper that Dr. Hauptmann is connected to very powerful ministers. He won't answer, redacted, but he wants me to assist him all the time. I go to his workshop in the evenings and he sets me to work on circuits for a radio he is testing. Trigonometry, too. He says to be as creative as I can. He says creativity fuels the Reich. He has this big upperclassman, they call him the Giant, stand over me with a stopwatch to test how fast I can calculate. Triangles, triangles, triangles. I probably do 50 calculations a night. They don't tell me why. You would not believe the copper wire here. They have redacted. Everyone gets out of the way when the Giant comes through. Dr. Hauptmann says we can do anything, build anything. He says the Führer has collected scientists to help him control the weather. He says the Führer will develop a rocket that can reach Japan. He says the Führer will build a city on the moon. To my dear sister Yuta. Today in field exercises, the commandant told us about Rainer Schleicher. He was a young corporal and his captain needed someone to go behind enemy lines to map their defenses. The captain asked for volunteers and Rainer Schleicher was the only one who stood up. But the next day, Rainer got caught. The very next day. The Poles captured him and tortured him with electricity. They gave him so much electricity that his brain liquefied, said the commandant. But before they did, Rainer said something amazing. He said, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Everyone says there is a great test coming, a test harder than all the other tests. Frederick says that the story about Rainer is redacted. Just being around the Giant, his name is Frank Volkheimer, means the other boys treat me with respect. I come up only to his waist, practically. He seems a man, not a boy. He possesses the loyalty of Rainer. In his hands and heart and bones. Please tell Frau Elena I am eating lots here, but that no one makes flour cakes like hers, or at all, really. Tell little Siegfried to look lively. I think of you every day. Sieg Heil. To my dear sister Yuta. Yesterday was Sunday, and for field exercises we went into the forest. Most hunters are at the front, so the woods are full of marten and deer. The other boys sat in the blinds and talked about magnificent victories and how soon we will cross the channel and destroy the redacted. And Dr. Hauptmann's dogs came back with 3 rabbits, 1 for each but Frederick. He came back with about 1,000 berries in his shirt, and his sleeves were ripped from the brambles, and his binocular bag was torn open, and I said, "You're going to catch hell," and he looked down at his clothes like he'd never seen them before. Frederick knows all the birds just by hearing them. Above the lake we heard skylarks and lapwings and plovers and a harrier hen and probably 10 others I've forgotten. You would like Frederick, I think. He sees what other people don't. Hope your cough is better, and Frau Elena's too. Sieg Heil. Oh my goodness. Perfumer. His name is Claude Levitt, but everyone calls him Big Claude. For a decade he has run a perfumery on the Rue Vaudreuil, a straggling business that prospers only when the cod are being salted and the stones of the town itself begin to stink. But new opportunities have arrived, and Big Claude is not one to miss an opportunity. He is paying farmers near Cancale to butcher lambs and rabbits. Claude buckles the meat into his wife's matching vinyl suitcases and carries them himself by train to Paris. It is easy. Some weeks he can make as much as 500 francs. Supply and demand. There's always paperwork, of course. Some official up the chain catches a whiff and wants a percentage. It takes a mind like Claude's to navigate the complexities of the business. Today he is overheating. Sweat trickles down his back and sides. St. Malo roasts. October is here, and bright cold winds ought to pour off the ocean. Leaves ought to tumble down the alleys. But the wind has come and gone, as if deciding it did not like the changes here. All afternoon, Claude hunkers inside his shop above the hundreds of little bottles of florals and orientals and fougaries in his vitrine, pinks and carmines and baby blues, and no one enters, and an oscillating electric fan blows across his face to the left, then to the right, and he does not read or move at all except to periodically reach a hand beneath his stool and grab a handful of biscuits from a round tin and stuff them into his mouth. Around 4 p.m., a small company of German soldiers strolls up the Rue Vaudreuil. They are lean, salmon-faced, and earnest. They have serious eyes. They carry their weapons barrel down, slinging them over their shoulders like clarinets. They laugh to one another and seem touched underneath their helmets with a beneficent gold. Claude understands that he ought to resent them, but he admires their competence and manners, the clean efficiency with which they move. They always seem to be going somewhere, and never doubt that it is the right place to be going. Something his own country has lacked. The soldiers turn down the Rue Saint-Philippe and are gone. Claude's fingers trace ovals across the top of his vitrine. Upstairs his wife runs a vacuum cleaner, and he can hear it coursing around and around. He is nearly asleep when he sees the Parisian who's been living 3 doors down exit the house of Etienne Leblanc, a thin, beaked-nosed man who skulks outside the telegraph office, whittling little wooden boxes. The Parisian walks in the same direction as the German soldiers, placing the heel of one foot against the toe of the other. He reaches the end of the street, scribbles something on a pad, and turns 180 degrees and walks back. When he reaches the end of the block, he stares up at the Ribault's house and makes several more notes. Glancing up, glancing down, measuring, biting the eraser of his pencil as though uneasy. Big Claude goes to the window. This, too, could be an opportunity. Occupation authorities will want to know that a stranger is pacing off distances and making drawings of houses. They will want to know what he looks like, who is sponsoring this activity, who has sanctioned it. This is good. This is excellent. Time of the ostriches. Still, they do not return to Paris. Still, she does not go outside. Marie Laure counts every day that she has been shut up in Etienne's house. 120. 121. She thinks of the transmitter in the attic, how it sent her grandfather's voice flying over the sea. Consider a single piece glowing in your family's stove. Sailing like Darwin from Plymouth Sound to Cape Verde, to Patagonia, to the Falkland Islands, over waves, across borders. Once you're done with the model, she asks her father, does that mean I can go out? His sandpaper doesn't stop. The stories Madame Manec's visitors bring into the kitchen are terrifying and difficult to believe. Parisian cousins nobody has heard from in decades now write letters begging for capons, hams, hens. The dentist is selling wine through the mail. The perfumer is slaughtering lambs and carrying them in suitcases on the train to Paris, where he sells the meat for an enormous profit. In St. Malo, people are fined for locking their doors, for keeping doves, for hoarding meat. Truffles disappear. Sparkling wine disappears. No eye contact, no chatter in doorways, no sunbathing, no singing, No lovers strolling the ramparts in the evenings. Such rules are not written down, but they may as well be. Icy winds whirl in from the Atlantic, and Etienne barricades himself inside his brother's old room, and Marie-Laure endures the slow rain of hours by running her fingers over his seashells down in his study, ordering them by size, by species, by morphology, checking and rechecking their order, trying to make sure she has not missorted a single one. Surely she could go out for half an hour on the arm of her father, and yet each time her father refuses, a voice echoes up from a chamber of her memory. They'll probably take the blind girls before they take the gimps. Make them do things. Outside the city walls, a few military boats cruise to and fro, and the flax is bundled and shipped and woven into ropes or cables or parachute cord, and airborne gulls drop oysters or mussels or clams, and the sudden clatter on the roof makes Marie-Laure bolt upright in bed. The mayor announces a new tax, and some of Madame Manec's friends mutter that he has sold them out, that they need un homme de poing, but others ask what the mayor is supposed to do. It becomes known as the time of the ostriches. Do we have our heads in the sand, madame, or do they? Maybe everybody does, she murmurs. Madame Manec has taken to falling asleep at the table beside Marie-Laure. It takes her a long time to carry meals the 5 flights to Etienne's room, wheezing the whole way. Most mornings, Madame is baking before anyone is awake. At mid-morning she goes out into the city, cigarette in her mouth, to bring cakes or pots of stew to the sick or the stranded, and upstairs Marie-Laure's father works on the model, sanding, nailing, cutting, measuring, each day working more frenetically than the last, as if against some deadline known only to him. Weakest. The warrant officer in charge of field exercises is the commandant, an overzealous schoolmaster named Bastien, with an expansive walk and a round belly and a coat quivering with war medals. His face is scarred from smallpox, and his shoulders look as though they've been hewn from soft clay. He wears hobnailed jackboots every second of every day, and the cadets joke that he kicked his way out of the womb with them. Bastien demands that they memorize maps, study the angle of the sun, cut their own belts from cowhide. Every afternoon, whatever the weather, he stands in a field bawling state-sown dicta. Prosperity depends on ferocity. The only things that keep your precious grandmothers in their tea and cookies are the fists at the end of your arms. An antique pistol dangles from his belt. The most eager cadets look up at him with shining eyes. To Werner he looks capable of severe and chronic violence. The corpse is a body, he explains, twirling a length of rubber hose so that its tip whirs inches away from a boy's nose. No different from a man's body. Just as we ask you each to drive the weakness from your own bodies, so you must also learn to drive the weaknesses from the corpse. Core. Excuse me. Sorry. One October afternoon, Bastien plucks a pigeon-toed boy from the line. You'll be first. Who are you? Bacher, sir. Bacher. Tell us, Bacher, who is the weakest member of this group? Werner quails. He is smaller than every cadet in his year. He tries to expand his chest, stand as tall as he can. Bacher's gaze rakes across the rows. Him, sir? Werner exhales. Bacher has chosen a boy far to Werner's right, one of the few boys with black hair. Ernst somebody. A safe enough choice. Ernst is in fact a slow runner, a boy who has yet to grow into his horsey legs. Bastien calls Ernst forward. The boy's bottom lip trembles as he turns to face the group. Getting all weepy won't help, says Bastien, and gestures vaguely to the far end of the field, where a line of trees cuts across the weeds. You'll have a 10-second head start. Make it to me before they make it to you. Got it? Ernst neither nods nor shakes his head. Bastien feigns frustration. When I raise my left hand, you run. When I raise my right hand, the rest of you fools run. Off Bastien waddles, rubber hose around his neck, pistols swinging at his side. 60 boys wait, breathing. Werner thinks of Jutta with her opalescent hair and quick eyes and blunt manners. She would never be mistaken for the weakest. Ernst somebody is shaking everywhere now, all the way down to his wrists and ankles. When Bastien is maybe 200 yards away, he turns and raises his left hand. Ernst runs with his arms nearly straight and his legs wide and unhinged. Bastien counts down from 10. 3, yells his faraway voice. 2, 1. At 0, his right arm goes up and the group unleashes. The dark-haired boy is at least 50 yards in front of them, but immediately the pack begins to gain. Hurrying, scampering, running hard, 59 14-year-olds chase 1. Werner keeps to the center of the group as it strings out, his heart beating in dark confusion, wondering where Frederick is, why they're chasing this boy, and what they're supposed to do if they catch him. Except in some atavistic part of his brain, he knows exactly what they'll do. A few outrunners are exceptionally fast. They gain on the lone figure. Ernst's limbs pump furiously, but he's clearly not accustomed to sprinting, and he loses steam. The grass waves, the trees are trisected by sunlight. The pack draws closer, and Werner feels annoyed. Why couldn't Ernst be faster? Why hasn't he practiced? How did he make it through the entrance exams? The fastest cadet is lunging for the back of the boy's shirt. He almost has him. Black-haired Ernst is going to be caught, and Werner wonders if some part of him wants it to happen. But the boy makes it to the commandant a split second before the others come pounding past. Mandatory surrender. Marie-Laure has to badger her father 3 times before he'll read the notice aloud. Members of the population must relinquish all radio receivers now in their possession. Radio sets are to be delivered to 27 Rue des Chartres before tomorrow noon. Anyone failing to carry out this order will be arrested as a saboteur. No one says anything for a moment, and inside Marie-Laure, an old anxiety lumbers to its feet. Is he in your grandfather's old room? Says Madame Manec. Tomorrow noon. Half the house, thinks Marie-Laure, is taken up by wireless receivers and the parts that go into them. Madame Manec raps on the door to Henri's room and receives no reply. In the afternoon they box up the equipment in Etienne's study, Madame and Papa unplugging radios and lowering them into crates. Marie-Laure sitting on the davenport listening to the sets go off one by one. The old Radiola 5, a GMR Titan, a GMR Orphée, a Delco 32-volt farm radio that Etienne had shipped all the way from the United States in 1922. Her father wraps the largest in cardboard and uses an ancient wheeled dolly to thump it down the stairs. Marie-Laure sits with her fingers going numb in her lap and thinks of the machine in the attic, its cables and switches, a transmitter built to talk to ghosts. Does it qualify as a radio receiver? Should she mention it? Do Papa and Madame Manec know? They seem not to. In the evening, fog moves into the city, trailing a cold, fishy smell, and they eat potatoes and carrots in the kitchen, and Madame Manec leaves a dish outside Henri's door and taps, but the door does not open, and the food remains untouched. What, asks Marie-Laure, will they do with the radios? Send them to Germany, says Papa. Or pitch them into the sea, says Madame Manec. Come, child, drink your tea. It's not the end of the world. I'll put an extra blanket on your bed tonight. In the morning, Etienne remains shut inside his brother's bedroom. If he knows what is happening in his house, Marie-Laure cannot tell. At 10 a.m., her father starts wheeling loads to the Rue des Chartres. 1 trip, 2 trips, 3, and when he comes back and loads the dolly with the last radio, Etienne still has not appeared. Marie-Laure holds Madame Manec's hand as she listens to the gate clang shut, to the cart's axle bounce as her father pushes it down the Rue Vaudreuil, and to the silence that reinstalls itself after he's gone. Museum. Sergeant Major Reinhold von Rumpel wakes early. He upholsters himself in his uniform, pockets his loop and tweezers, rolls up his white gloves. By 6 a.m. he's in the hotel lobby in full dress, polish on his shoes, pistol case, snapped shut. The hotel keeper brings him bread and cheese in a basket made from dark wicker, covered nicely with a cotton napkin. Everything ship-shape. There is great pleasure in being out in the city before the sun is up, street lights glowing, the hum of a Parisian day commencing. As he walks up the Rue Cuvier and turns into the Jardin des Plantes, the trees look misty and significant, parasols held up just for him. He likes being early. At the entrance to the Grand Gallery, 2 night wardens stiffen. They glance at the stripes on his collar patch and sleeves. The cords in their throats tighten. A small man in black flannel comes down the staircase, apologizing in German. He says he is the assistant director. He did not expect the sergeant major for another hour. "We can speak French," says von Rumpel. Behind him scurries a second man with eggshell skin and an evident terror of eye contact. "We would be honored to show you the collection, Sergeant Major," breathes the assistant director. "This is the mineralogist, Professor Hublin." Hublin blinks twice and gives the impression of a penned animal. The pair of warders watch from the end of the corridor. "May I take your basket?" "It's no trouble." The gallery of mineralogy is so long von Rumpel can hardly see the end of it. In sections, display case after display case sits vacant, little shapes on their felted shelves marking the silhouettes of whatever has been removed. Von Rumpel strolls with his basket on his arm, forgetting to do anything but look. What treasures they left behind! A gorgeous set of yellow topaz crystals on a gray matrix, a great pink hunk of beryl like a crystallized brain, a violet column of tourmaline from Madagascar that looks so rich she cannot resist the urge to touch it. Burnonite, apatite on muscovite, natural zircon in a spray of colors. Dozens more minerals he cannot name. These men, he thinks, probably handle more gemstones in a week than he has seen in his lifetime. Each piece is registered in huge organizational folios that have taken centuries to amass. The pallid Hublin shows him pages. Louis began the collection as a cabinet of medicines, jade for kidneys, clay for the stomach, and so on. There were already 200,000 entries in the catalogue by 1850, a priceless mineral heritage. Every now and then von Rumpel pulls his notebook from his pocket and makes a notation. He takes his time. When they reach the end, the assistant director laces his fingers across his belt. "We hope you are impressed, Sergeant Major. You enjoyed your tour?" "Very much. The electric lights in the ceiling are far apart, and the silence in the huge space is oppressive. But," he says, enunciating very slowly, "what about the collections that are not on public display?" The assistant director and the mineralogist exchange a glance. "You have seen everything we can show you, Sergeant Major." Von Rumpel keeps his voice polite, civilized. Paris is not Poland, after all. Waves must be made carefully. Things cannot simply be seized. What did his father used to say? See obstacles as opportunities, Reinhold. See obstacles as inspirations. "Is there somewhere," he says, "we can talk?" The assistant director's office occupies a dusty third-floor corner that overlooks the gardens, walnut-paneled, overheated, decorated with pinned butterflies and beetles in alternating frames. On the wall behind his half-ton desk hangs the only image, a charcoal portrait of the French biologist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. The assistant director sits behind the desk, and von Rumpel sits in the front, with his basket between his feet. The mineralogist stands. A long-necked secretary brings tea. Hublin says, "We are always acquiring, yes? All across the world, industrialization endangers mineral deposits. We collect as many types of minerals as exist. To a curator, none is superior to any other." Von Rumpel laughs. He appreciates that they are trying to play the game, but don't they understand that the winner has already been determined? He sets down his cup of tea and says, "I would like to see your most protected specimens. I am most specifically interested in a specimen I believe you have only recently brought out from your vaults. We are reading, Crystal, we are reading All the Lights We Cannot See. Here we go. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. The assistant director sweeps his left hand through his hair and releases a blizzard of dandruff. Sergeant Major, the minerals you have seen have aided discoveries in electrochemistry, in the fundamental laws of mathematical crystallography. Ooh. The role of a national museum is to operate above the whims of fashions of collectors, to safeguard for future generations the... Von Rumpel smiles. I will wait. You misunderstand us, monsieur. You have seen everything we can show you. I will wait to see what you cannot show me. The assistant director peers into his tea. The mineralogist shifts from foot to foot. He appears to be wrestling with an interior fury. I am quite gifted at waiting, Von Rumpel says in French. It is my one great skill. I was never much good at athletics or mathematics, but even as a boy I possessed unnatural patience. I would wait with my mother while she got her hair styled. I would sit in the chair and wait for hours. No magazine, no toys, not even swinging my legs back and forth. All the mothers were very impressed. Both Frenchmen fidget. Beyond the door of the office, what ears listen. Please sit, if you'd like, Von Rumpel says to Hublin and pats the chair next to him. But Hublin does not sit. Time passes. Von Rumpel swallows the last of his tea and sets the cup very carefully on the edge of the assistant director's desk. Somewhere an electric fan whirs to life and runs a while and shuts down. Hublin says, It's not clear what we're waiting for, Sergeant Major. I'm waiting for you to be truthful. If I might stay, says Von Rumpel, sit. I am sure if one of you were to call out instructions, the mamselle who looks like a giraffe will hear. Will she not? The assistant director crosses and recrosses his legs. By now it is past noon. Perhaps you would like to see the skeletons? Tries the assistant director. The Hall of Man is quite spectacular, and our zoological collection is beyond... I would like to see the minerals you do not reveal to the public. One in particular. Hublin's throat splotches pink and white. He does not take a seat. The assistant director seems resigned to an impasse and pulls a thick, perfect-bound stack of paper from a drawer and begins to read. Hublin shifts as if to leave, but Von Rumpel merely says, Please, stay until we have resolved this. Waiting, thinks Von Rumpel, is a kind of war. You simply tell yourself that you must not lose. The assistant director's telephone rings, and he reaches to pick it up, but Von Rumpel holds up a hand, and the phone rings 10 or 11 times and then falls quiet. What might be a full half-hour passes, Hublin staring at his shoelaces, the assistant director making occasional notes in his manuscript with a silver pen, Von Rumpel remaining completely motionless. And then there is a distant tapping on the door. Gentlemen, comes the voice. Von Rumpel calls. We are fine, thank you. The assistant director says, I have other matters to attend to, Sergeant Major. Von Rumpel does not raise his voice. You will wait here, both of you. You will wait here with me until I see what I have come to see, and then we will all go back to our important jobs. The mineralogist's chin trembles. The fan starts again and then dies. A 5-minute timer, guesses Von Rumpel. He waits for it to start and die one more time. Then he lifts his basket into his lap. He points to the chair. His voice is gentle. Sit, Professor. You will be more comfortable. Hublin does not sit. 2 o'clock out in the city, and bells toll in 100 churches. Walkers down on the path. The last of autumn's leaves spiraling to earth. Von Rumpel unrolls the napkin across his lap and lifts out the cheese. He breaks the bread slowly, sending a rich cascade of crust onto his napkin. As he chews, he can almost hear their guts rumbling. He offers them nothing. When he finishes, he wipes the corners of his mouth. You read me wrong, messieurs. I am not an animal. I am not here to raise your collections. They belong to all of Europe, to all of humanity, do they not? I am here only for something small, something smaller than the bone of your kneecaps. He looks at the mineralogist as he says it, who looks away, in crimson. The assistant director says, "This is absurd, Sergeant Major." Von Rumpel folds his napkin and places it back in the basket and sets the basket on the ground. He licks the tip of his finger and picks the crumbs off of his tunic one by one. Then he looks directly at the assistant director. The Lycée Charlemagne, is that right? On the Rue Charlemagne? The skin around the assistant director's eyes stretches. Where your daughter goes to school? Von Rumpel turns in his chair. And the college Saint-Islas, isn't it, Dr. Hublin, where your twin sons attend on the Rue Notre-Dame-des-Champs? Wouldn't those handsome boys be preparing to walk home right now? Hublin sets his hands on the back of the empty chair beside him, and his knuckles become very white. One with a violin and the other a viola. Am I correct? Crossing all those busy streets. That is a long walk for 10-year-old boys. The assistant director is sitting very upright. Von Rumpel says, I know it is not here, messieurs. Not even the lowest janitor would be so stupid as to leave the diamond here. But I would like to see where you have kept it. I would like to know what sort of place you believe is safe enough. Neither of the Frenchmen says anything. The assistant director resumes looking at his manuscript, though it is clear to Von Rumpel that he is no longer reading. At 4 o'clock, the secretary raps on the door, and again Von Rumpel sends her away. He practices concentrating only on blinking. Pulse in his neck. Tock, 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 tock. Others, he thinks, would do this with less finesse. Others would use scanners, explosives, pistol barrels, muscle. Von Rumpel uses the cheapest of materials. Only minutes, only hours. 5 bells. The light leaches out of the gardens. Sergeant Major, please, says the director. His hands flat on his desk, looking up now. It is very late. I must relieve myself. Feel free. Von Rumpel gestures with one hand at a metal trash can behind the desk. The mineralogist wrinkles his face. Again the phone rings. Hublin chews his cuticles. Pain shows in the assistant director's face. The fan whirs. Out in the gardens, the daylight unwinds from the trees, and still Von Rumpel waits. Your colleague, he says to the mineralogist, he's a logical man, isn't he? He doubts the legends, but you seem more fiery. You don't want to believe. You tell yourself not to believe. But you do believe. He shakes his head. You've held the diamond. You've felt its power. This is ridiculous, says Hublin. His eyes roll like a frightened colt's. This is not civilized behavior. Are our children safe, Sergeant Major? I demand that you let us determine if our children are safe. A man of science, yet you believe in the myths. You believe in the might of reason, but you also believe in fairy tales, goddesses and curses. The assistant director inhales sharply. Enough, he says, enough. Von Rumpel's pulse soars. Has it already happened so easily? He could wait 2 more days, 3, while ranks of men broke against him like waves. Are our children safe, Sergeant Major? If you wish them to be. May I use the telephone? Von Rumpel nods. The assistant director reaches for the handset, says Sylvie into it, listens a while, and then sets it down. The woman enters with a ring of keys. From a drawer inside the assistant director's desk, she produces another key on a chain. Simple, elegant, long-shafted. A small locked door at the back of the main floor gallery. It takes 2 keys to open it, and the assistant director seems inexperienced with the lock. They lead Von Rumpel down a corkscrewing stone staircase. At the bottom, the assistant director unlocks a second gate. They wind through warrens of hallways, past a warder who drops his newspaper and sits ramrod straight as they pass. In an unassuming storeroom filled with drop cloths and pallets and crates, behind a sheet of plywood, the mineralogist reveals a simple combination safe that the assistant director opens rather easily. No alarms, only the one guard. Inside the safe is a second, far more interesting box. It is heavy enough that it requires both the assistant director and the mineralogist to lift it out. Elegant, its joinery invisible. No brand name, no combination dial. It is presumably hollow, but with no discernible hinges, no nails, no attachment points. It looks like a solid block of highly polished wood. Custom work. The mineralogist fits a key into a tiny, almost invisible hole on the bottom. When it turns, two more tiny keyholes open on the opposite side. The assistant director inserts matching keys into those holes. They unlock what looks like 5 different shafts. 3 overlapping cinder locks, each dependent on the next. Ingenious, whispers Von Rumpel. The entire box falls gently open. Inside sits a small felt bag. He says, "Open it." The mineralogist looks at the assistant director. The assistant director picks up the bag and unties its throat and upends a wrapped bundle into his palm. With a single finger, he nudges apart the folds. Inside lies a blue stone as big as a pigeon's egg. And with that, we will call our reading to a close for the evening. Oh my goodness. How is everyone doing so far? Is everyone keeping up all right? I apologize if at some points I got tongue-tied this evening. Oh my goodness. An hour and a half. It goes by quick, but sometimes not so much. Oh my goodness. All right. So, we're getting close to about halfway in the story. We're getting close. I think we can right there. Oh, thank you, Deborah. I am trying. I really am trying. So as it will be like normal, Friday we will pick up at same time, 8 to 9:30. So we will be doing again Tuesday 8 to 9:30, Friday 8 to 9:30. So I would like to thank you all who hung with me for this hour and a half listening to me read. I'm assuming you're enjoying it so far. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening and have a great week. And I will see you all on Friday. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.